45-year-old Robert Martinez stood at the Family Feud podium with his shoulders slightly hunched, carrying the weight of 3 years of unemployment that had gradually eroded his confidence and sense of self-worth. Despite wearing his best suit, the same one he had worn to countless job interviews over the past 36 months, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that everyone in the studio could see the rejection letters, the automated "thank you for your interest" emails, and the slow transformation from hopeful applicant to discouraged job seeker. Beside him stood his 16-year-old daughter, Emma Martinez, whose presence represented both his greatest motivation to keep trying and his deepest source of shame about his inability to provide the stable life she deserved. Emma carried herself with the maturity of someone who had learned to be understanding about canceled plans, secondhand clothes, and the tension that filled their apartment whenever another job application was rejected. When Steve Harvey asked the question that would cut to the heart of Robert's daily struggle, the response came from a place of raw honesty that surprised even Robert himself. "What do you need most in your life right now?" "Just one chance," Robert said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "One employer who will look at my skills and experience instead of my age. I've been unemployed for 3 years, not because I can't do the work, but because I'm 45 and companies want younger engineers. I have 20 years of experience, but nobody wants to give me the opportunity to prove that experience is valuable." The Family Feud studio fell into the kind of uncomfortable silence that comes when 300 people simultaneously recognize they are witnessing someone's honest assessment of a system that has failed him. This wasn't just a game show answer. It was a middle-aged professional's desperate plea for the opportunity to support his family and regain his dignity through meaningful work. Steve Harvey felt his chest tighten with a combination of respect and frustration. As someone who understood the importance of hard work and family responsibility, Steve could see in Robert's posture and expression the ongoing battle between a man's desire to provide for his daughter and the crushing reality of age discrimination in the modern job market. Let me take you back to how we got here. Robert Martinez had been a successful software engineer for over 20 years, specializing in database architecture for mid-sized technology companies in Phoenix. He had built a solid career and provided a comfortable middle-class life for Emma and his late wife Carmen, who had died of breast cancer when Emma was 12. The layoffs had come in 2021, when Robert's company was acquired by a larger corporation that eliminated redundant positions. Despite 20 years of excellent performance reviews, Robert had been among the first employees let go. Robert had initially approached his job search with confidence, but responses had been disappointing from the beginning. Most applications received automated rejections, and the few interviews he secured seemed to go well technically, but he began noticing patterns suggesting age was becoming a factor. "We're looking for someone who can grow with the company," became a common refrain that Robert understood as code for "we want someone younger and cheaper." As unemployment stretched from months into years, Robert had been forced to dip into savings, downsize his lifestyle, and eventually take part-time retail work at $12 per hour, despite having a master's degree in computer science and 20 years of professional experience. "Dad, we could move to a smaller apartment," Emma had suggested after 18 months of unemployment. "I don't need my own room." Robert had been heartbroken that his daughter was worrying about finances instead of typical teenage concerns, but Emma's maturity and loyalty had sustained him through the darkest periods. "I feel like I'm failing you," Robert had told Emma when discussing college plans affected by their financial situation. "Dad, you're showing me what it looks like to keep trying when things are hard," Emma had replied. "That's character, not failure." The psychological impact had been as challenging as the financial pressure. Robert had begun questioning his abilities, wondering if perhaps he really was too old to adapt, despite evidence that he had successfully learned new technologies throughout his career. The Family Feud opportunity had come through Emma's high school counselor, who thought Robert's story represented challenges facing older workers. Emma had been enthusiastic, hoping the experience might give Robert confidence and positive recognition. "Dad, people will get to see how smart you are," Emma had told Robert. "Maybe someone watching will realize that older workers have value too." Robert had been hesitant about appearing on television while unemployed, But Emma's enthusiasm and his desire to raise awareness about age discrimination had convinced him to participate. During the flight from Phoenix to Atlanta, Robert had been thoughtful and somewhat nervous, not about appearing on television, but about representing the broader issue of age discrimination while maintaining his dignity and hope for the future. "Emma," he had said as they checked into their hotel, "I want to be honest on the show about our situation, but I also don't want to sound bitter or angry. I want people to understand that this isn't about me personally. It's about a system that wastes experienced workers." Emma had looked at her father with pride. "Dad, you're the most positive person I know. Considering everything we've been through, people are going to see that you're not bitter. You're just someone who wants to work." The Family Feud studios had been energizing for Robert in unexpected ways. The bright lights, the enthusiastic audience, the energy of television production, everything about the environment had felt professional and exciting, reminding Robert of the kind of dynamic workplace he missed from his engineering career. During the family introductions, Robert had presented himself with the honesty and dignity that unemployment had tested but not broken. "I'm Robert Martinez," he had said clearly. "I'm 45 years old, and I'm from Phoenix. This is my daughter Emma, and I've been looking for work as a software engineer for 3 years. I have 20 years of experience, but I'm discovering that experience isn't always valued the way it used to be." The audience had responded with sympathetic applause, and Steve had immediately understood that Robert's story represented something significant about the challenges facing older workers in America. "Robert, first of all, I have a lot of respect for you for being honest about your situation," Steve had said, his voice carrying genuine respect. 3 years is a long time to be looking for work. How have you been staying positive?" Robert had looked at Emma, then back at Steve. "It hasn't been easy, but I have the best motivation in the world, sitting right next to me. Emma deserves to see that hard work and persistence matter, even when the results take longer than we'd like." Steve had been impressed by Robert's grace under pressure and his focus on his daughter rather than his own struggles. The game had progressed with Robert participating thoughtfully and demonstrating the quick thinking and problem-solving skills that had made him successful in his engineering career. His ability to analyze survey questions and predict popular answers impressed both Steve and the audience. The Martinez family was playing against the Thompson family from Georgia, and both teams had been supportive and encouraging. During the second round, when Steve asked for things that get better with age, Robert had buzzed in with experience and wisdom, earning the #1 spot on the board, and a meaningful look from Steve, who understood that Robert was speaking from personal knowledge about the value of maturity. But it was during the fourth round that the moment arrived that would potentially change Robert's life forever. Steve had announced the survey question with his usual energy, not knowing that he was about to ask something that would force Robert to articulate his deepest professional longing. "What do you need most in your life right now?" The question hung in the studio air, and for a 45-year-old who had spent 3 years watching his savings disappear and his confidence erode, the answer was both simple and profound. Robert had stepped up to the microphone with the dignity of someone who had learned that speaking truth was important, especially when that truth might help other people understand systemic problems they hadn't considered. "Just one chance," Robert had said, his voice carrying clearly across the studio. "One employer who will look at my skills and experience instead of my age. I've been unemployed for 3 years, not because I can't do the work, but because I'm 45, and companies want younger engineers. I have 20 years of experience, but nobody wants to give me the opportunity to prove that experience is valuable." The studio had fallen into uncomfortable silence. This wasn't just a game show answer. It was an experienced professional's honest assessment of age discrimination in the American workplace, spoken with the kind of dignity that made everyone present understand they were witnessing something important. Steve Harvey slowly set down his index cards, something in Robert's tone, in the way he had spoken about needing just one chance rather than asking for charity or sympathy, told him that this was a moment requiring more than standard game show response. "Robert," Steve said gently, "what you're describing is something that affects millions of workers, but people don't talk about it enough. Tell us what it's been like trying to find work when you have all this experience." Robert looked at Emma, who gave him an encouraging nod, understanding that this was Robert's truth to share and his expertise to demonstrate. "It's frustrating because I know I can do the work," Robert explained, his voice growing stronger as he spoke about something he rarely discussed publicly. "In interviews, I can answer every technical question they ask. I can solve problems that stump younger candidates, but then they say they're looking for someone who can grow with the company or someone with fresh perspective. And I know those are just polite ways of saying they want someone younger." The audience murmured with recognition, many people understanding that they were learning about discrimination that affected workers across many industries. "I've taken courses, learned new technologies, updated my skills constantly," Robert continued. "But none of that seems to matter when they see a 45-year-old man walking into the interview. They've already decided I'm too old before I even speak." But what happened next was something that no one in the studio, not Robert, not Emma, not even the producers, had anticipated. During Robert's emotional explanation, a woman backstage had been taking notes and making urgent phone calls. Sarah Chen, the West Coast Talent Acquisition Director for Microsoft, had been in Atlanta for a technology conference and had attended the Family Feud taping as a guest of a colleague in the entertainment industry. Sarah had immediately recognized that Robert was exactly the kind of experienced professional that Microsoft had been struggling to find for several senior-level positions. His description of his background matched perfectly with an opening they had been trying to fill for months, and his honest discussion of age discrimination had impressed her with his character and integrity. "That engineer on stage represents exactly what we need in our Phoenix office," Sarah had whispered to her assistant. 20 years of database experience, additional training in modern systems, and the maturity to mentor younger employees. "We've been looking for someone like him for 6 months." While Robert was speaking about his need for just one chance, Sarah was backstage, reviewing his background and preparing to offer him exactly what he had been seeking. "Steve," Sarah whispered into the host's earpiece, "I'm Sarah Chen, Talent Acquisition Director for Microsoft. We have a senior database architect position open in Phoenix that would be perfect for Robert. Would he be interested in hearing about a job offer?" Steve's eyes widened as he understood the magnitude of what was being offered. This wasn't just a game show anymore. This was about to become one of the most satisfying examples of talent recognition in television history. "Robert," Steve said, "there's someone here who has been listening to everything you said about your experience and skills, and she has something very important to discuss with you. Sarah Chen from Microsoft, would you please come out here?" Robert's face showed confusion mixed with hope as he watched a professional woman in business attire approach from backstage. "Microsoft? What's happening?" Sarah approached Robert with the confidence of someone who recognized talent when she saw it and had the authority to act on that recognition. "Robert," Sarah said, "I'm Sarah Chen, West Coast Talent Acquisition Director for Microsoft. I've been listening to your background, and I want you to know that we have been searching for someone with exactly your experience and qualifications for months." Robert stared at Sarah and struggling to process what he was hearing after 3 years of rejections. "You mentioned database architecture, system optimization, and recent training in cloud computing and AI applications," Sarah continued. "We have a senior database architect position open in our Phoenix office that requires exactly that skill set. The position offers a starting salary of $110,000, full benefits, and the opportunity to lead a team of younger engineers who would benefit enormously from your experience." Emma grabbed her father's arm as the audience began to realize what was happening. "Are you offering me a job?" Robert asked, his voice carrying disbelief and hope in equal measure. "I'm offering you an interview that I'm confident will lead to a job offer," Sarah replied. "Based on what you've described, you're exactly what we need. Your experience isn't a liability, it's precisely why we want you." What happened next was one of the most emotionally powerful moments ever captured on television. Robert's face broke into the first genuine smile Emma had seen from him in months as the reality of Sarah's words began to sink in. "Emma," Robert said, turning toward his daughter, "did you hear that? Microsoft wants to interview me. They think my experience is valuable." Emma threw her arms around her father, while the studio audience erupted in applause that wasn't typical game show celebration, but pure joy for a man who had finally received the recognition he deserved. But Robert wasn't finished processing this life-changing opportunity. He turned back to Sarah with questions that showed both his professionalism and his continued disbelief. "Miss Chen, are you sure? I'm 45 years old, and I've been unemployed for 3 years. Are you certain Microsoft wants someone like me?" "Robert," Sarah replied with a smile, "we don't want someone like you, we want you specifically. Your combination of experience, continued education, and persistence tells us everything we need to know about your character and capabilities." Steve Harvey then did something that would become one of the most meaningful moments in Family Feud history. He removed his suit jacket, his lucky jacket that he wore to every taping, and approached Robert. "Robert," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "this jacket has been with me for every show I've hosted, but today it belongs with someone who just proved that persistence and dignity pay off. You didn't get bitter, you didn't give up, and you didn't let rejections define your worth." He placed the jacket around Robert's shoulders. "You wear this to remember that experience isn't something to apologize for, it's something to be proud of. And you take it to your first day at Microsoft as a reminder that some companies are smart enough to value what you bring to the table." Robert pulled the jacket closer around himself, then looked directly into the cameras. "To everyone out there who's been told they're too old, too experienced, or not the right fit, don't give up. There are companies that understand that experience and wisdom are assets, not liabilities. Keep applying, keep learning, and keep believing in your worth." The studio erupted in the longest applause in Family Feud history. 300 people, recognizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary about perseverance, dignity, and the importance of valuing experienced workers. What happened after the cameras stopped rolling became a story of new beginnings and restored confidence. Robert began work at Microsoft 6 weeks later as a senior architect responsible for mentoring younger engineers and leading complex database projects. 6 months later, Robert was thriving in his new role, had been promoted to lead architect, and had implemented system improvements that saved Microsoft significant time and money. His team consistently rated him as an excellent mentor, combining technical expertise with wisdom. 3 years later, Robert was leading Microsoft's database architecture team for the Southwest region and had become a company advocate for hiring experienced professionals. The episode sparked conversations about age discrimination and the importance of companies valuing experienced workers. The lesson that 45-year-old Robert taught that day extends far beyond employment or age discrimination. He reminded the world that persistence in the face of systemic bias is not just admirable, but necessary, that dignity maintained during difficult periods reflects true character, and that some rejections are not reflections of worth, but failures of imagination by those doing the rejecting. Steve Harvey learned that day that the most powerful moments in television happen when you're willing to facilitate connections between talent and opportunity, helping people understand that some dreams deferred are not dreams denied, but dreams waiting for the right moment to be fulfilled. Sarah Chen and Microsoft learned that some of their best hires come from recognizing talent that other companies have overlooked, and that diversity in age brings the same benefits as diversity in other dimensions: different perspectives, valuable experience, and the kind of wisdom that can only come from years of professional development. Because that's what opportunity looks like when it finally arrives, not just employment, but validation that persistence and dignity have value in the marketplace. That's what justice sounds like when it's delivered, not revenge against those who discriminated, but proof that some companies are wise enough to value what experience brings. And that's what happens when a father's 3-year struggle meets a company's understanding that age is an asset, proving that the most important victories are often the ones that take the longest to achieve.